My name is Robert King. By way of introduction, I became one of Jehovah's Witnesses exactly 30 years ago. During the first 20 years, I was actively involved as a public minister, an occasional auxiliary, as well as a regular pioneer and a congregation elder. However, for the past decade, I've been deeply immersed in an independent study of the prophets. And for the past nearly 5 years, I've undertaken to serve in the biblical role of a modern-day watchman by publishing my work on the internet and by means of the book Jehovah Himself Has Become King, published in September of 2005. 3 years ago, in the spring of 2004, I undertook a massive mailing campaign of an 8-page letter to virtually every kingdom hall and assembly hall in the United States and Canada, as well as to many congregations in Great Britain, New Zealand, and Australia, and all 100 branch offices of the Watchtower Society around the world, for the purpose of informing the elders of the ramifications of the Watchtower's apostasy in connection with its secretive 10-year partnership with the United Nations as an NGO, the details of which have been documented on ewatchman.com. More recently, a less extensive mailing campaign was undertaken in the United States and Great Britain by myself and a few supporters to expose the Watchtower's shameful lawyering strategy that has reproached the very name of Jehovah by arguing before the courts of the land that Christian elders bear no responsibility to protect the children in the congregations from being seduced and abused by the thousands of known sexual predators lurking within the organization. Although because of my stand the Watchtower Society now considers me to be an apostate opposer of the truth, I nonetheless remain committed to the cause. The reason being, all things considered, I remain convinced that Jehovah God has heretofore exclusively used the Watchtower Society and Jehovah's Witnesses as his earthly instrument to accomplish a vital phase of his unfolding purpose. What is more, I am further convinced that in the concluding chapter of Jehovah's ongoing work, he will yet use a faithful core of Jehovah's Witnesses in a marvelous way, which the leadership of the organization cannot possibly envision at present. Whereas Jehovah's Witnesses imagine that the much-anticipated coming of Christ and the foretold judgment upon the house of God began decades ago, back in the 1914-1919 period, it is my firm conviction that the thief-like coming of the Master to judge the slaves of his household is a future event, though imminent. Certainly, a thorough house cleaning is in order. While the history-shaping events of the 1914 era recede further and further into the past, the evidence abounds that the symbolic 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are about to be unleashed upon an unsuspecting world and a slumbering Watchtower Society. Hence, like the biblical watchmen of old, I've endeavored to announce Jehovah's oncoming judgments as contained in the prophecies. But certainly, the Watchtower Society sees no need for a watchman to sound the alarm concerning Jehovah's judgments. And besides, Jehovah's Witnesses have been trained not to give heed to any voice that does not emanate from Bethel headquarters. While on the one hand, the general consensus among the non-JW community, and a growing number of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses as well, is that the Watchtower Society is a dangerous cult and a false prophet. Why would anyone believe that God has used this particular group? Indeed, why am I, a disfellowshipped witness, still committed to the cause of Jehovah's Witnesses? To address that issue, I prepared the following presentation entitled, The Watchtower Society and Jehovah's Witnesses, Past, Present, and Future. fully appreciate the vital role that Jehovah's Witnesses have played in the advancement of the truth, we have to take into consideration the religious condition that existed inside Christendom prior to the founding of the Watchtower Society. Contrary to popular opinion, the odd collection of numerous denominations and countless sects making up Christendom are not really representative of genuine Christianity. The truth is, none of the basic teachings of the mainstream denominations have any support in the Bible whatsoever. Traditional doctrines like the Trinity, the immortality of the human soul, and the hideously evil doctrine of eternal torment are in fact teachings of demons. Besides Christendom's hypocritical involvement in politics and her active or passive support for every war that has ever been fought, there are a host of other popular beliefs and customs that were adopted from paganism by the Vatican centuries ago and which have subsequently been perpetuated by Catholic, Orthodox, Lutheran, and Protestant denominations and subsects to this very day. But back in the late 1800s, most people in Europe and the Americas were still churchgoers and held the clergy in high esteem and were not inclined to question church teachings. So that was the setting in 1874 when a bold young man by the name of Charles Taze Russell organized a small group of truth-hungry Christians in the Pittsburgh area for the purpose of undertaking a systematic study of the Scriptures to determine the truth. They called themselves the Bible Students, and eventually the International Bible Students. But Charles Russell was not content to merely know the truth of the Bible. He was possessed with an evangelizing spirit from the very beginning. He was once quoted as saying regarding the doctrine of eternal torment, that if there actually were such a place as a fiery hell, where hapless souls are tortured by fiendish demons for an eternity, then the warning ought to be shouted from the rooftops. But if hell is actually the grave, from which the unconscious dead are resurrected, then Christians ought to undertake to remove the foul stain that the doctrine of eternal torment has brought upon God's good name. And the latter is exactly what Charles Russell endeavored to do. So it was that in 1884, Pastor Russell, as he was then called, used his considerable personal wealth, and together with the Bible students associated with him, instituted the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania in order to facilitate the work of publishing the truth regarding hell and the nature of death and the falsity of the Trinity, and so on. Soon, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society was publishing magazines, tracts, and Bibles by the millions, and Russell's sermons were appearing in newspapers all across America.